Albert Einstein once wrote, "I have no special talents. I am only passionately curious." Smart as he was, I think maybe he got this wrong. I mean, isn't passionate curiosity in itself a talent, or at very least a character strength? Where would we be without curiosity? It has played a central role in every human invention. Maybe that even underplays it a bit. I'd say it's the motivation behind every new step anyone has ever taken. Curiosity leads directly to exploration and discovery, to taking an interest in ongoing experience for its own sake. And yet, there are many sayings, myths, and legends about the dangers of curiosity. Curiosity killed the cat. We all know that one. And then the story goes, Pandora was created by Zeus and was the first woman. So she was the sister-in-law of the trickster god Prometheus, who we all know gave mortals fire. Pandora was given a box fashioned by Zeus. A more accurate translation would say it was a jar. But she was told never to open it. But she was young and naive and curious, and her curiosity got the better of her. She ignored the warning, opened the box, and as the story goes, unleashed evil upon the world. You know, it's interesting that Eve's curiosity in the Garden of Eden is similarly said to have brought sin into the world. But the thing is, if these stories are suggesting that curiosity is a female trait, maybe they're actually trying to tell us that women are scientists by nature. Also, if every one of us is descended from these earliest women, doesn't that mean curiosity is literally in our DNA? I don't know about you, but I'm kind of curious about that. I think for most of us, curiosity is deeply ingrained in us as a trait. We can't help ourselves. We have questions. We want answers. We want our curiosity satisfied.
I don't know that it's working at all.
Back in the midst of time, when our ancestors wanted to know why things happened, they created myths and stories to explain things. They used their creativity, inventing gods and goddesses. Who set events in motion. If there was a drought, it was the fault of the gods. If there was a great harvest, it was because they'd sacrificed a couple of pigs to Demeter. Of course, many people still seek external explanations, creating stories to explain things that we just don't understand. Some of us create conspiracy theories. These days, our world seems awash in them. Or, if you're like me, when we have a question, we turn to Google. Just the other day, my husband Rob and I were plodding through rush hour traffic on Beach Boulevard and trying to distract ourselves from the tedium. We decided to ask Google some random questions. The first was, why is the sky blue? An age-old question if there ever was one. Maybe you're curious about the answer. Well, the reason is that sunlight is scattered in all directions by the gases and particles in Earth's atmosphere. But blue light is scattered more than the other colors because it travels in shorter, smaller waves. And so our eyes see a blue sky as a result. Then Rob came up with this conundrum. If nature abhors a vacuum, And space is a vacuum. Why doesn't it get filled up with stuff? Anyone curious about that? The answer is that nature abhors a vacuum is not a law of physics, but rather a phrase popularized by Aristotle that actually describes aspects of pressure. On Earth, liquids or gases rush in to fill the voids because of atmospheric pressure and gravity. But space has no atmospheric pressure and is so vast that there just isn't enough matter to fill it. Besides, gravity is the stronger force, and it pulls together particles, forming stars and planets and gas clouds, leaving those vast stretches almost completely empty. Of course, anyone who has spent time with toddlers will recall them incessantly asking, why? Why can't the dog have chocolate? Because it will make her sick. Why will it make her sick? Because dogs can't digest chocolate. Why can't dogs digest chocolate? Isn't it time for your TV show now? A little boy comes home from school and asks his mother, where do I come from? Embarrassed and avoiding the talk, she says, go ask your father. So the boy goes and asks his dad, where do I come from? And his dad goes in all the details about sex, conception, and birth. And the boy is wide-eyed listening to all this. How come you wanted to know, son? Well, the little boy replied, we had a new boy in class today, and he comes from Scotland. The thing is that at that age, children experience rapid cognitive development and have a natural interest in the world around them. So while this question asking can quickly become annoying, there's a good reason for it. But that might not be the only reason for it. They may also just want to keep your attention by extending the conversation, or simply be testing the limits, or pushing back against a rule, or trying to avoid something you've asked them to do. But in every case, they're constructing mental maps of their world and figuring out rules and learning from the adults around them. They're like sponges, soaking up information. Their little brains are on overdrive. And isn't that marvelous? But then in grade school, there comes a shift. Some of us begin to feel that our questions are disruptive, or we may fear looking dumb. Shouldn't I already know the answer to that question? In those cases, our curiosity can be stifled unless it's channeled by a good teacher. It seems that most of us UUs manage to escape any efforts to suppress our curiosity. We don't tend to hold back on our questions, do we? No, we never stop questioning, never stop asking why. We can be found questioning everything, life, the world around us, even theology. We keep asking why. We always want to know how we can do better. At least for us, it is part of our DNA. I don't know if I've ever mentioned to you about Michael Servetus. He was a Spanish physician and theologian of the 1500s. And like Einstein, he was passionately curious, especially about the human body. Among other things, he was the first European to correctly describe pulmonary circulation. Servetus was also a zealous theologian. While he was studying law in Toulouse, France, he came across a printed Bible. This was only 63 years after the invention of the printing press, so Bibles weren't yet placed by the Gideons in every hotel room. He soon devoured the book, but reading it made him wonder about some of the beliefs taught by the Catholic Church. He spent the rest of his life asking, what does the text actually say? And does this doctrine hold up under direct scrutiny? Catholics didn't welcome his questions, and unfortunately and disappointingly, neither did the Protestants. His questions led him to publish a treatise called On the Errors of the Trinity in 1531, where he challenged the Trinitarian doctrine. We can't quite say that he was a Unitarian, but he certainly laid the foundation for us. However, I guess that John Calvin wasn't very open to questioning such theological matters either, because in 1553, he had Servetus burned at the stake along with his books. But that didn't stop people from debating the doctrine. In 1605, in the Polish city of Krakow, the community of Polish brethren published what they called the Rakovian Catechism. Unusual for a catechism, it didn't proclaim settled answers. Instead, it posed challenges to every major Christian doctrine, and then followed reason and scripture, exploring where those questions led. The document asked, where does the text actually support this, and does it make rational sense? It modeled a kind of curiosity, a disciplined inquiry, rather than a rigid assertion of authority. And I think our UU approach to theology, along with many other things, can be seen as following in the same tradition. Our contention is that revelation is not sealed. In fact, James Luther Adams, a 20th century UU theologian, coined the phrase that revelation is continuous. In other words, divine truth and human understanding are not rigidly locked into place by sacred texts. Instead, we believe that the human story and our relationship to the sacred continuously speak to us through nature, history, science, and personal experience. It is our task to keep listening for the truth that endlessly reveals itself to us, to all of us. We see people as active participants in a living process of growth and change, even if it can sometimes be uncomfortable. We are determined not to let our view of the world grow stagnant. We know that there are many perspectives and that change is the only constant in the universe. Nigerian author Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie warns us about the dangers of a single story. She says that when we have a single story about other people, it becomes impossible for us to see them as any other way but what our preconceived narrative tells us. If we grasp tightly to our fixed default position about people, about issues, we risk missing the full complexity of life. The media often defaults to telling us a single story about people and issues. They tell it over and over again until that is what it becomes in our mind. And when we meet a person from a different culture, someone who has been pigeonholed by what we've seen and read, we can be shocked, taken aback, or even embarrassed that we have let ourselves come to believe a single story. Think about how the media reports on Africa. It's a huge continent with over 54 sovereign nations and diverse cultures, economies, educational levels. And yet from the time that I was a child, all I saw were people starving, and then later on dying of AIDS. Today, perhaps, we see images of pirates, militias, kidnappers, and failed states. And of course, there's not a mention of colonialism and its impact on the African countries and their people. As Adida Che says, a single story creates stereotypes, and stereotypes by their very nature are incomplete. As she says, they make one story become the only story, and it robs people of dignity. Do you hold a single story about any group of people? How about we think about this? You're driving somewhere and suddenly another car pulls in front of you. What do? It's common and easy to respond by defaulting to anger and frustration. We seem to be wired to go directly from feeling hurt or threatened to indignation. Sometimes all it takes is a few words or even just a glance, and we quickly and directly resort to blame. Sometimes we even may get furious. It all tends to happen so fast and automatically that we often don't realize how rapidly our feelings turn into stories, and our stories turn into other feelings, and they can escalate into something much larger. Jack Hammerstein of the Center for Understanding in Conflict says that we judge ourselves by our intentions. We judge our intentions to be good and worthy, and yet we judge others by the effects of their actions upon us. He says we don't automatically give others a benefit of the doubt. However, if we can find a way to interrupt that reflexive response for just a moment, we can shift from furious to curious. We can reframe our assumptions. We can ask, is the other person stressed out or overwhelmed? Do they have the skills they need to manage their emotions or to handle this situation differently? You know what? Maybe the best thing to do in this case is to assume that everyone we meet is both stressed out and overwhelmed. Maybe we can spend a moment to be curious about what is happening in another person's life. And then maybe we can give each other a little grace. The poet E.E. Cummings came up with something that applies to this, what he called a more beautiful question. Author and questionologist, that is one who focuses their research and writing on the art and science of questioning, a curious profession, if you ask me. Warren Berger loved that phrase, a more beautiful question, so much that he used it in the title of his book about fostering innovation, solving problems, and sparking creativity. He defined it this way: a beautiful question is an ambitious yet actionable question that can begin to shift the way we perceive or think about something, and that might serve as a catalyst to bring about change. I think we need to hear that definition again. A beautiful question is an ambitious yet actionable question that can begin to shift the way we perceive or think about something that might serve as a catalyst to bring about change. I wonder if you might start thinking about a beautiful question that you might have. And Katie's got some Post-it notes for us, and we're going to post them on the back wall there a little bit later. So I wonder if by asking beautiful questions, we might allow our curiosity to lead us into personal growth, closer relationships, into deeper meaning, and to explore further into our imaginations. I'd like to believe that by approaching life with an inquisitive heart, by saying, let's explore this, rather than, oh, I already know that, we can unlock a world of joy and discovery and become like those little toddlers who are searching out the answers to every question and remapping their brains. So I invite you to try to come up with a beautiful question right now, one that is ambitious yet actionable, one that can begin to shift the way we see the world and lead to positive change. And we're going to stick them on the newsprint that's back by the lunch tables. I can't wait to see your beautiful questions. Stay curious.